Awesome. Well, it is 12 o'clock, so we will just go ahead and begin. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here, for taking the time out of your day to do this. My name is Kristen Dollar. I am the Director of Programs here at Just Faith Ministries, and with me today is Leela Oakley, and she's the Outreach and Engagement Manager. And so I'll do the first part of this presentation, and then Leela will jump in for the second half. Just to let you know, we have everybody on mute just so that we can all hear the presentation. And then at the end, we'll try to leave plenty of time for questions and answers that you can type into the chat box. And you can find the chat box on the bottom of your screen in the toolbar. And you can send those questions at any time, and then when it's time for the Q&A, Leela and I will do our best to answer them, and you can send those questions to me, Kristen, or to Leela. First, though, we will begin with an opening prayer. The prayer is called, the prayer is in a book called Rally, Communal Prayers for Lovers of Jesus and Justice, and it's by Brittany Wynn Lee. Let us pray together. Calling all those partaking in a resurrected life, who have known a death that did not kill them.
Come those with very little left to lose, and those holding most things loosely but love. We need you.
Come all who are almost indifferent and undone, who are wielding disappointment as vigor.
Come those who fall asleep in the soul's dark night, but are awakened with a heart full of hope. We need you.
Come with your words, old, eaten, and new. Come, though uncertain about where it's all headed.
Come with your aching need to be heard. And you who are new to the listening, we need you.
Come resolved to creatively find third ways. Come committed to not rushing out of tension.
Come with eyes unwilling to overlook injustice and a heart unwilling to forgo celebration. We need you.
Come ragamuffin, radical, rebel, repressed. Come you who were wrong and willing to say it.
Come refusing to deny the stories of your people. Come with the assurance of God's grace as your guide. We need you.
Come marchers, intercessors, artists, and prophets. Come newcomers and those who have tried and tried again.
Get close. Get close. Get close now. Draw near, ask questions, sing songs, take steps. We need you together.
And together we'll be patient and mercifully kind, not envying, boasting, prideful, or rude.
Not selfish, short-fused, score-keeping, or spiteful, but rejoicing in the goodness of what's to be shared. We need you. We need you together.
Because together, the movement keeps going. Sound the alarm because love cannot fail.
Come resistors, revolutionaries, the meek who inherit the earth. There will indeed be a story to tell.
And this is it. When the light was threatened, all God's people said, "Let's go."
Let's go.
Amen. Now we'll share a brief video about the Racial Justice series.
As people of faith, we are called to fight for justice. Racial injustice has always existed in our country, but so many of us have just now woken up to its reality. Communities from every background are asking today, where do we start? The Racial Justice series from Just Faith Ministries offers a place to start. The series has 3 programs designed to guide groups of 8 to 14 people on an 8-session journey to understand racial injustice, talk about it, and respond to it in a spirit of humility, openness, and hope. Each program was written in collaboration with topic experts and includes key readings and video resources, intentional conversation, prayer, and calls to action. It is time for people of faith to fight for justice. We invite you to join us today.
All right. So I know that there might be some folks in the call who are brand new to Just Faith Ministries. If you're brand new to us, if you've never taken a program before, can you just raise your hand? All right. Oh, welcome everybody. That's so great to have some new folks. Well, just a little bit about us. Our role is to seek to provide participants this space to create community and grow spiritually and equip people to seek justice. And the way that our process works is a facilitator convenes their own group, either virtually over Zoom or another video conferencing platform, or in person. This is not a class that you sign up for and then we facilitate. You can facilitate that with your own virtual or in-person communities. And, and I really think that this empowers communities to be able to take action either in their own networks or their virtual networks or in their churches and their in-person communities. And we hope that this process really inspires action. You can read a little bit about this on this slide right here. By our founder, Jack Jezreel. We have several programs, a wide variety of programs covering a wide variety of topics. We have our Just Faith and Just Faith Catholic series, which is particularly focuses on the core principles of our faith and the call to stand in solidarity with the poor, with people who are experiencing poverty, and it equips people to help to stand in solidarity with the poor and to help alleviate poverty in their local communities. Of course, we have our Racial Justice series, which we will talk about today. We have Youth for Justice, which are youth programs. You can find out about more of this and all of our programs on our website. We have Just Engagement, The Power to Change, which is about grassroots organizing and advocacy and how you go about doing that. We have our Engaging Spirituality series, which is meant to sustain folks who are already involved in this and justice work and to renew them and give them some spiritual tools for doing justice work even better. We have Hunger, a Faith and Justice Response, which is that hunger and food insecurity and how we can help to alleviate that. Faith and Immigration Justice, obviously about immigration. Cultivating Nonviolence, Harvesting Peace is about nonviolent movements and also includes some nonviolent communication tools. And then we have our Eco Justice series, which Sacred Land, it's food and farming, Sacred Air, Climate and Energy, which is about to come out in this spring, and then Sacred Water, Climate, Oceans, Ecosystems, which is still in the works. So today, as I said, you all are here to hear about the Racial Justice series. So first, I'll just give you a little bit of overview about the series as a whole. The series are 3 programs. Each of the programs are 8 sessions plus a retreat and an immersion experience. You can do one of these programs, or you can do them all. As the video mentioned, we worked in collaboration with some partners in order to offer the Racial Justice series. One of the partners is Vicki Vernon Lott, who was a primary consultant. She has a lot of experience facilitating dialogue around racial justice and has worked in several HBCUs and just has a lot of experience and knowledge, and we could not have done this without her. Dr. Lewis Brogdon, who is a local professor at Simmons College, and Simmons College is one of our partners. They're a local HBCU, and Dr. Brogdon has so much expertise on this subject and really helped to shape the program as a whole. Just his mark and his wisdom are intertwined throughout. And of course, we have Bread for the World, who is a partner for all of our programs, and we use their tools to help people to better engage in advocacy and community organizing. So now I'm going to focus in on each of the programs themselves. The first one is Faith and Racial Equity, Exploring Power and Privilege. As this slide says, this program awakens participants to the economic systems, public policies, cultural norms, and hidden biases that empower some and oppress others. So this program really takes a deep dive into specific issues related to power and privilege. And it begins by introducing a framework for understanding and recognizing racial disparities. It guides participants in exploring how their faith theologically should inform their response to what they're learning about privilege. And it also guides folks in discerning action steps for making a difference, that hopefully is both effective and in line with their faith in their own communities and in our nation. You can read a little bit about these slides. You'll notice so the first 4 of them, they focus on setting up a framework, a groundwork for understanding privilege. So just some general understanding about what race is and how it was invented, so how we are socialized in order to perform race, and a little bit about, we don't talk a lot about whiteness, but it's really important to talk about that in order to understand racism and racial justice. And then the next 3 sessions dive into some very specific issues related to privilege. So it kind of provides some examples of how what you learned in sessions 1 through 4 play out in the real world. And then session 8 is dedicated to discerning a comprehensive action plan for how folks will respond to what they learned. And really all the sessions do this. They're set up in what, so what, now what. So if you come from a Catholic background, you might remember that the See, Judge, Act model is pretty much the same thing, just different words. But addressing the issue, beginning by addressing the issue itself and understanding the issue, discerning why it matters, and why it's important to us and our communities, and then now what, discerning action. And so each of these sessions has those 3 components within them. And then in session 5, there's an opportunity to bring in a guest speaker who works in seeking racial justice. And then between sessions 6 and 7, there is an immersion experience in which participants can get to know maybe an organization or a church that is involved in racial justice efforts in order to learn more about their work and to be inspired, and to hopefully learn about an opportunity to plug into this work after the session is over. You can do that virtually as well. And then so we'll move on to our next program. So the first one was Faith and Racial Equity. That was about privilege. Well, this one, Faith and Racial Healing, Embracing Truth, Justice, and Restoration, is about history. So this program guides participants in telling the truth about the history of racism in the United States so that we can work together towards true reconciliation with God and restoration with one another. So if you're like me, you might ask, well, given all the urgent concerns around racial injustice that we're seeing right now, happening right now, why would you choose a program on history? And I want to tell you a little bit about why this program is so important. We for so long have tried to skip skip the hard part and skip right to the easy part, which is unity and reconciliation, without first doing that hard work of truth telling. And so that's what this program is about. And you might even recognize some of that theologically, before we come to receive the Eucharist or come to the communion table, we first have to confess what we have done and left undone, the things that have come between us and our relationship with God and us and our neighbors. And then once we do that, once we can voice those things, articulate those things, and and commit to doing better, then we can truly give and receive love from God and love from our neighbors, and we can truly be the community that we are called to be. And so that's really some of the theological undertones, the theological foundation for this program, understanding the mistakes of our past and naming those and confessing those, so that we can really pursue racial healing and embrace truth, justice, and restoration. And also another reason that this is important is because in order to be able to dismantle the systems of racial injustice that are in place today, we have to understand how those systems of injustice were formed in the first place and how they're maintained. And so learning our history is really crucial in that. So, those things might even seem like really normal to us if we haven't taken the time to study them in our education systems, our criminal justice systems, and even our church life. So learning the history is extremely important. You can kind of see here an outline of how this program moves historically. We start out actually before slavery occurred, and study a little bit about culture and history in Africa before people were enslaved. And we also start out with a big racial timeline exercise, racial injustice timeline exercise, to understand how a specific history that we cover fits into this larger, greater narrative. It's of course by no means complete, but helps us to kind of understand a little bit. We move to the middle passage. We read some slave narratives, people who experienced slavery, and reading a little bit about their experiences and their wisdom and their theology. And then we talk about convict leasing and Reconstruction and how that has kind of propped up our system of mass incarceration today. We talk about our tragic history of lynching and its relevance to today. We talk about civil rights and the struggle for equal education, civil rights movement in general. And we also get into the true theology of Dr. Martin Luther King, which is really important. Dr. King is still so relevant and helpful to us today. And so hopefully that this session will give you some ideas of how you can use his theology to better support your own and inform your own racial justice efforts. And then session 8 is, of course, all about action. Like the Faith and Racial Equity, there is an opportunity to hear from a guest speaker. There's also an opportunity for an immersion experience in an organization working towards racial justice. There's also an opening retreat, which you can do virtually as well. And just a couple notes about this. We focus specifically on African slaves, and people who are enslaved from Africa and their descendants. However, we hope that this program, and have found this program, does open people's eyes to the patterns of injustice that affect other communities of color as well. And so just a couple of reasons of why we chose this focus. One of them is because the history of slavery in the United States is foundational to understanding the invention of race. And so that's crucial to understanding all the different manifestations of racism. So understanding that particular history is important. We also wrote this program at a time when attention was finally being turned to this subject. So we wanted to really equip people to do this work, help equip people to do this work of racial justice even better, given that they were already passionate about being involved in this, which is amazing. And then the final reason is because we wanted to focus in on this one history, because we'd rather do this one thing well rather than too many things poorly. So that's just some of the reasons for this focus. The final program is called Faith and Racial Justice, Changing Systems and Structures. And as the slide says, this program invites participants to form their own Christian-rooted responses to racism in their churches, workplaces, and communities. So this program looks specifically at the structural issues around racial injustice, and it guides participants in discerning how they can help tackle those issues. There's a particular emphasis in this program on mass incarceration and criminal justice, but it does get into a lot of other really important subjects that are so relevant to today. And there really are some great ways that we can plug into this work and help dismantle these systems of racial injustice. Some of those topics that's covered are the racial wealth gap is so important, redlining and its consequences, so housing issues, faith communities and reentry. So what are some ways that we can accompany people who are coming out of this despicable system of mass incarceration? What are some ways that we can accompany them and be of support during this difficult time? The reparations debate, so that's a really sensitive subject, so we want to really understand what's behind that. So Dr. Lewis Brogdon, who was one of our partners and consultants, does an amazing lecture on that you'll watch, and we'll answer some of the questions and concerns that and curiosities that you might have around reparations. Session 7 is mobilizing for criminal justice reform, and so that will get at some of like the action pieces and behind a lot of the things that you've been studying through reading the new Jim Crow, and I'll get into a little bit more about books a little bit later. But this is a really big action step for mobilizing people to really make an impact on dismantling mass incarceration and working for criminal justice reform. And then finally, session 8 is the commitment to action piece. And that's where you make like in the other 3 programs, you make an extended plan for how you're going to take action and how you're going to hold each other accountable and support each other when you are taking action. So some of the resources used throughout the program, there's all kinds of videos and YouTube videos and sessions begin and end with prayer, but the books are often what people really want to know about. So you can see here the books that we chose. 40 Days of Prayer by Sherry Mills, you'll see, is used throughout, and it's an opportunity for spiritual practice, spiritual reflection between sessions each week. So then last, I just want to get at some of the questions that people often ask us. And one of those questions is, in what order should I take these programs? Well, we recommend taking the first 2 programs. You can take either of the first 2 programs first, Faith and Racial Equity or Faith and Racial Healing, wherever you find, your folks might be most interested. That's the one to start with. I will say that Faith and Racial Equity, we try to be very clear that this program is not for the faint of heart, as we say. It addresses some really tough topics, and so if you maybe want an easier access point, I mean, Faith and Racial Healing is by no means not challenging. It is absolutely challenging, but sometimes we find that folks who are new to talking about this topic in their churches, Faith and Racial Healing might be a better place to start, and then move to Faith and Racial Equity, but can really go either way. But we definitely recommend taking one of those first 2 programs first, and then moving on to Faith and Racial Justice. And as I said, you can either take one program, or you can take 2, or take them all. Another question that we often get is, how do we talk about racism without causing a split in the church? So people are really worried about bringing this topic into their congregations. They know that it's important to talk about it, but they're really worried about the tension that this might cause. And my own response is really, well, as Christians, we are called to speak truth and to stand in solidarity with folks who are on the margins, even when there's real risk involved. However, that said, one of the primary reasons that we developed this program in the first place is because we are really well aware that there is a lot of tension around this issue, particularly in churches, and that like a botched attempt at conversation or not having the training or support you need, it does have the potential to, cause more harm than good. And so that's why we created these programs. we have found that they intended that they will, and we've found that this is true, that they teach communities the skills that they need to engage in important conversations with listening and mutual respect. We try to teach people how to engage in holy conversation, where conversation itself is an act of worship. And, and also there's this support that you have as a facilitator. There's a facilitator training webinar that one of our consultants, Dr. Vicki Lott, gives, as well as like live facilitation support through Leela. And so we really expect that after having gone through this process, your group we really think that your group can expect to have grown closer together and at the same time be better equipped to have hard conversations around this and any issue, no matter what the subject matter is. Another question that we often receive is, well, what if my group is an all-white group? Is that okay? Do we need to have people of color in our group? And in order to proceed, is it better to have a more diverse group? And our answer is yes. While it is absolutely beneficial to have a diverse range of experiences and backgrounds in your group, that will provide a much richer experience. We also acknowledge that a lot of our audience attends predominantly white parishes and so in churches, and we have created this program to be facilitated there where there might not be as much diversity. We really believe that people of color have been burdened so much of having to teach white people about racism, which can be traumatizing and is unfair. And so instead, we have worked with consultants who have deeply studied this and are experts on this issue, but have also lived out in their personal experience like what it is to be a person of color, what it is to be Black in in a world of racial injustice. And so their experiences and their voices are woven throughout the program. There's also videos and books by people of color, so you'll hear from their experiences and that way. And yeah, so I guess the short answer is it okay if my group is an all-white group? Should we proceed? Is yes, absolutely. Another question is, are these programs relevant to people of color? And our experience so far has been yes. We have found that people have remarked that reading about other people's experiences through the books and the videos that we've chosen, and hearing them name these experiences and name these these things that have happened to them, and seeing that this is happening to other people too. This can be affirming, and hopefully it can help them to process their own experiences. And also another thing is, especially with faith and racial healing and faith and racial justice, our schools are usually don't teach the history of racism, and they don't teach about systemic issues. So people of color might very well be new to some of this material as well. So we expect that they might find it enlightening and important to learn about just as much as it's important and enlightening for white folks too. And then the last question that we usually get is, does one of the facilitators need to be a person of color? And our answer to that is that, according to our consultant, Dr. Lott, who does this work all the time, she recommends that groups that are all white do not necessarily need a person of color as a co-facilitator. However, if your group is more diverse, we do recommend that one of the persons be a person of color if that's possible. So that's all I have. I will turn it over to Leela, and again, don't hesitate to put your questions in the chat and send them to me or to Leela.
Great, thank you, Kristen. It is good to be here with you all. As Kristen said, I'm the Outreach and Engagement Manager of Just Faith Ministries, and what that means is the majority of my work is spent supporting individuals like yourself as you bring programs to your community. So I'm here to walk you through the discernment process, and then along the way for any questions or issues that might come up as you begin the process of planning, promoting, facilitating and coordinating the groups. So I'm going to go over just kind of some basics about these programs and about Just Faith Ministries programs in general, some suggestions for how to get started, and then we'll open up for a time of question and answer. So as Kristen mentioned earlier, these programs are 8 sessions, and I want to really make you aware of the fact that they're 8 regular sessions plus an opening retreat and an immersion experience. So in total, your small group would be gathering 10 times. Most groups will meet over an 8 or 9 week period. So they'll meet consecutively every week for 9 weeks, the first week being the opening retreat, the second week being the first session all the way through the end. We invite groups to do the immersion experience between session 6 and 7, as Kristen mentioned. And so most groups will have that meeting scheduled in between sessions, but that's just an important thing to consider as you're kind of planning and setting the dates for a small group, to consider all of those various meeting times and how you want to organize that time together. Our programs are designed for small groups. So we say between 8 and 12 or 8 and 14 individuals. My recommendation for those of you who are planning to meet virtually, which I know for most of us, that's kind of our only option right now, is to have a smaller group. So really to keep it between 8 and 11 or 12 individuals. And the reason for that is, well, there's a few reasons. One is if you've been on a Zoom call like today, when someone's not sharing their screen, you have 2 different display functions on Zoom, where you can have speaker mode where you're seeing the person speaking in big form and then other small faces above, or you can have it where everyone's kind of on a checkered board. And if you have say 16 individuals, you're dividing the space on your screen between 16 people and 16 faces versus 10. And that may not seem like a big deal, but when you're trying to connect over a virtual platform, it really does matter how well you can see other people. In addition, our virtual meetings are designed to be 2 hours in length, which means that they are a half an hour shorter than our in-person meetings. And so the time of dialogue and conversation is shortened to accommodate that time adjustment. And so if you're dividing that time of dialogue between 16 people versus 12, every person gets less time to process and share. So those are just some things to keep in mind as you're promoting and planning is what you want the cap size to be of your small group. For most people, it is not an issue finding participants, especially for these programs. So usually I tell folks, you probably don't need to worry about how small can my group be, but the real concern is how big can it be and where do you need to set that cap. As I've mentioned multiple times, and Kristen's mentioned, these can be done in a virtual and in-person format. And for these programs, we have what we call a facilitator manual and a participant packet. And we have versions of those for our facilitators and participants for in-person meetings and virtual meetings, which means the content of those are the same, but the formatting and the language we use for those materials are designed for their different platforms. So if you're facilitating a virtual meeting, the instructions for a facilitator will say, now share this video through the share screen function in Zoom or another video conferencing platform. And then on the other end, if you're in person, it will say, now show this video through your laptop, hooking it up to a TV for the small group. So we've done our best to make those 2 versions and formats of the program offer the same experience, but tweaked to the specificity of the format. And again, as I mentioned, that time difference is 2.5 hours versus 2 hours for virtual. Kristen mentioned earlier the texts that go along, the books that go along with each of the programs. And what we expect participants of these small groups to do is to engage in weekly assignments. So that's between each session. They're given assignments from maybe 1 or 2 of the books for the program, possibly a documentary or a short video or an article. Each week that assignment looks a little bit different. But the assignment traditionally takes between 45 minutes to an hour and a half. And that just is going to depend on the individual's speed of reading and consuming information, how much time maybe they have to give to the assignment. But you can expect folks to need about that much time between session to get through the material and to be able to come prepared, ready to share with the group and gain wisdom and insight from their fellow participants. A session outline. Many of you have, I'm sure, downloaded a sample session of one of our racial justice programs, but I wanted to give you this snapshot. So all of our programs begin with an opening prayer or meditation. Then there's going to be a big chunk of dialogue. There's going to be break and business announcements, another chunk of dialogue, and then a closing prayer. And those times of dialogue, one of them are going to be centered around the readings from the weekly assignment, and the other might be around a video or an activity. That's going to change each session, but again, you can expect to have 2 large chunks of time where the group is engaging in conversation and dialogue. Now, some logistics. So how to actually go about getting started. If you're leaving this meeting today and you know that you want to use one of these programs in your community, whether that be with a group of friends, a group of colleagues, within your faith community, the first thing you're going to want to do is register for the program. By registering, you immediately get access to the program materials through our online platform, which means you can review the materials, you can begin planning and doing some of the steps that I have listed below that I'll get to in a moment. To register, each of these programs is $225 per registration. And with that registration fee, it's a one-time fee for the small group, you get access to the program for a whole year. So let's say you are a staff person with a nonprofit who wants to use one of these programs or all 3 of them as a training tool for the staff. You could run multiple small groups at the same time using that one registration fee. The only additional fee is going to be the cost of books, and that typically is around $40 per participant. There is a one-time fee of $10 for documentary and faith and racial equity. So I just like to make that note that there's an additional fee in that program, but that's a one-time fee for the entire group. And books can be purchased through Just Faith Ministries, or if you decide you'd rather, you can purchase those at a local bookstore or through another provider. Once you've registered, you gain access to the material, you can begin to assess what gathering format is appropriate for your small group, whether you can meet safely together, social distance, or if you're going to be meeting through Zoom or another video conferencing platform. Then becomes the fun work of deciding who are going to be the co-facilitators. So we have facilitators, not teachers of our programs, which means we recommend between 2 and 3 individuals who have committed to facilitating the small group. These are not experts of the topic. These are not educators, as I mentioned. These are people who have interpersonal skills and organizational skills that will organize a small group, set up some of the logistics, and then follow the outlines that we provide for each session, leading the group within that session. As Kristen mentioned, we have a training for our facilitators that Dr. Vicki Vernon-Lott has conducted, and we've recorded and make available to every facilitator. And then we have Just Faith Ministries specific training twice a month, live trainings, as well as one-on-one support. I'm available for questions and support whenever. Once you know who's going to take on the role of facilitating, you can begin to set the dates for the meetings and begin recruiting participants. And we do have promotion materials available. You can download those for free from our website that give you things like social media content, even text for an email to send to friends and colleagues to invite them, really anything you might need to get the word out that this program's happening, what is the program about, and then get them connected and a part of the small group. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen. And Kristen and I are going to open up for a time of Q&A. But before I begin to read the questions, I will let you all know that I'll be sending a follow-up email. It will most likely be, if not tomorrow, it will be Monday. And in that follow-up email, you'll get a recording of this event. And you'll also get a PDF version of the slides that we just presented on. So you can share that with other folks you might want to spread the word about the program with, potential participants, or just review back for your own interest. Okay, Kristen, I've got a question for you. What role do you see for the pastor in the programs. So I'll kind of add on a few questions around this. Does the religious leader of the community, the pastor, need to be a participant in the program? Should they be a facilitator of the program? What kind of a relationship should they have to the small group? And
Excellent question. I came into this job because I was a pastor myself. I'm a United Methodist pastor, but there's a lot of folks of different denominations on our staff. But anyway, I found as a pastor that Just Faith Ministries programs were so influential to my congregation that I wanted to be on the staff. So I have some personal experience with this. Pastors, I personally find it really great to empower lay folks. So if you have some lay folks who are passionate about this issue and are, well-organized folks who have interpersonal skills, I personally recommend empowering those folks to be co-facilitators. But I've also facilitated myself. I've been and recruited another lay person to facilitate alongside me, and that's worked really well. We've also had groups where the pastor has participated in the conversation, and it's been, it's not something that you typically learn in seminary. Like, you might learn pieces of this information, but it tends to be really enlightening for pastors as well. And it can be really great to just go through this process alongside your folks. So I guess my shorter answer would be, you can facilitate, you can be a part of the group, or you can just play a support role on the side. You don't necessarily have to participate in any of this if for some reason you are not able to.
Thank you, Kristen. Someone has asked about whether we would recommend their Racial Justice Committee and its allies to take the program first together before opening it up to the larger congregation, or to start by inviting the entire congregation. And Kristen, I'll answer this and then feel free to chime in if I leave anything out. I'll start by saying I don't think you can go wrong either way. And when I say that, I mean, you can facilitate these programs for your entire congregation and for anyone interested without having gone through the program first. We don't require that facilitators have participated in the program before facilitating. You'll have the support that you need to facilitate the first time around. So if you would like to begin by opening it up to your entire community, I would just recommend that you have folks from that Racial Justice Committee who are willing and interested in facilitating in place first. What we've seen is that people who open it up to their entire community will get feedback from 80, 90, 100, depending on the size of your faith community, hundreds of people who say, I'm interested. And then you might find yourself in a situation where, we weren't prepared for this much interest, and now I'm scrambling to find facilitators. So if you're gonna open it up to the whole congregation, I'd recommend first talking to the committee, looking at the program together, and identifying a group of people who are interested in bringing this to the larger community. On the flip side, if you want to start with just the Racial Justice Committee, that's a great way to build sustainable growth. So for example, that committee could participate in the program, be transformed together. And then once they've done that, they can commit to pairing off and opening new small groups within the community. And it's really going to be up to the committee to determine whether or not they want to have that initial learning transformational process together before beginning the role of facilitating for the larger congregation, or if they feel comfortable jumping first to that. That was a little bit of a roundabout answer. I hope that answered your question. If it didn't, feel free to reply back in the chat. Kristen, anything you want to add to that?
I can't think of anything.
Okay, I have a question right here. So this individual is saying that they already meet with a group of folks for 1 hour every other week, and is wondering if the program can be broken up to fit their current format of meeting. So 1 week doing the video discussion, another week doing reading and discussion. Kristen, I'll let you answer that one, and then I'll jump in after you're done.
Okay. I think so. I don't know if we have had any experience with that, and so Lila might be able to speak to that. I think that you could do that. Yeah, I don't see why not.
Yeah, I'll jump in. Sorry, Kristen, I was gathering my thoughts and tossed it to you so I could gather them. I would say that is not ideal. It is not ideal to break up the session because it really is designed to be kind of a comprehensive experience in and of itself, each individual session. And so there's a flow to the session. But if that is the only way that you're going to be able to get the small group to participate in the program is by breaking it up and tweaking the content a little bit to make that work where it's just an hour each week, I would say it's worth your time to make that adjustment in order to offer the program. But again, if you have the ability to promote the program as a 2-hour long session, I would encourage you to do so. It's going to be a more comprehensive and I think probably transformative experience because you're able to go through the full session together and it won't feel quite as disjointed. But again, we have to be flexible and work with the situations we find ourselves in. And so if that's all you can get from people, then I would say you can make it work and it will still be a powerful process.
Agreed. Great answer.
Okay, I've got a question here. Do you recommend having the racial justice series with adult parishioners or congregation members and the Youth for Justice program taking place simultaneously? Or would you recommend doing the adult programming first and then incorporating the Youth for Justice series?
I mean, I think it could work great simultaneously. There aren't as many, the Youth for Justice series isn't just about racial justice. There's other topics included in there as well. And you can kind of select which ones your youth group might be interested in. I think that, like, from experience, it's been really great to have family programming at the same time so that, you know, parents can attend and then also have something for their kids to do. So, I mean, logistically that works out really well. But I think that either you can't really go wrong if you decide to do one before the other.
Okay, someone has asked about what training is offered or required for facilitators. So we do require, strongly encourage facilitators to participate in the training with Dr. Vicki Vernon-Lott. We do not, we don't have a way of enforcing that, but we strongly recommend facilitators participate in that training. It is recorded and available to facilitators in their online account, so it can be viewed at any point in the preparation process. In addition to that training, we have optional twice monthly training, live trainings that I lead that help facilitators and offer training for all of our Just Faith Ministries programs. So it goes over just best practices for facilitators, everything from how do you engage in dialogue versus discussion, how do you lead difficult conversations, to some of the practical stuff like when should you start preparing for the immersion experience and what are some ideas for immersion experiences in a virtual world. So things like that. And again, as I mentioned earlier, I'm available for one-on-one questions and support. So if you get started along the way and something comes up, you can email me or call me. And apart from being on vacation, which another staff member will cover for me, I will get back to you within 24 hours. And I try my best to get back to you in the same day. Okay, I have a question about what are some sustainable outcomes for this program. So what are we seeing folks in individually and in small groups and then congregations doing as an outcome of this program or these program series? And I'll answer this, and then Kristen, if you have some stories you want to add in. What I'm hearing a lot is that small groups individually and then as a collectively making commitments to get involved in local advocacy and organizing groups. So groups like the local interfaith group in their area who does advocacy work around justice issues that relate to racial justice. So education reform, criminal justice reform, issues like that. So you're seeing people who are making a commitment, maybe reaffirming a commitment or making a commitment to the first time to begin engaging very seriously with advocacy around these issues. We're also seeing people commit to educating their communities. So people who are going from doing our programs and bringing them to a wider community of folks who have not yet explored this topic. So we're seeing a big spread of, here I am in Norfolk, Virginia, and I do the program, and now I realize I've got this community of friends who've never explored racial injustice in our country, and I am taking this program to them and expanding the reach, or if not taking our program, I would be doing a book study with them. So I'm hearing that a lot, but people are so motivated and they're realizing this is content I did not know before, and it is essential to racial equity in our country that I have to go and help to educate and to expand that knowledge for others. And then the last thing I'm seeing is I'm hearing a lot of stories of people who are engaged with local nonprofits who are doing justice work around issues. So for example, working with an organization that does reentry work for folks who are getting out of prison, but they don't just do kind of reentry work helping with employment and housing, but that organization also does local advocacy. So they're advocating for reform and change and policy around reentry in the criminal justice system. So getting engaged with nonprofits, getting engaged in policy and advocacy, and then becoming more invested in the spread and education of the material. Kristen, anything you want to add to that?
I don't talk to facilitators quite as much. So mainly my own experience, hearing the results comes from our pilot groups, and someone in our pilot group decided to go back to school at a local HBU and to get an entirely different degree. Someone else decided to really invest in affordable housing in our area, and somebody else went back and looked through their ancestry to try to figure out how maybe their family was complicit in some of the things that have happened, and to seek restoration in some ways. So that we just had a really great experience, and it was transformational. Some of our staff went through this pilot group too, and it's been hugely transformational for us as well. And so we're grateful too.
Okay, I've got a few questions that I'll offer up and then answer. So someone has asked how the retreat works virtually. So great question. The virtual retreat is significantly shorter. Usually you hear the word retreat and you think it's going to be an all-day in-person thing. And that is the in-person version of the program has a much lengthier retreat because you can sustain that kind of energy when you're in the room with a group of people. But for our virtual programs, the retreat is shortened to, I think it is 2.5 hours. Kristen, am I correct?
Yes.
Yeah, so the retreat is shortened, and we have done that by just selecting the key activities and exercises that we think are most important. So it can be done over Zoom or another video conferencing platform in a shorter time period. Someone asked if the program can be done every week or every 2 weeks rather than every week. And yes, our most groups, and our recommendation is to do it every week, and that keeps people engaged and present and avoids the reality when you're not meeting as frequently of what did we talk about last time, or having to kind of remember where you left off. If you extend the time between the meetings too far, that becomes a barrier, I think, to the process. But every 2 weeks, I think, would be just fine. I don't believe that folks will forget what they're engaging with, and it might give them more time to process the reading and the weekly assignments. But again, I would encourage probably not much more than every 2 weeks. The facilitator training with Dr. Vicki Vernon Lott is a little over an hour. I think it's an hour and 5 minutes maybe. So it's comprehensive, but it is not, it's just an hour and 5 minutes or so. And if you do have any questions for Dr. Vicki Vernon Lott following that training, you're welcome to reach out to me and I can connect you with her directly. She is willing to chat and engage with interested facilitators as she's able. And so know that that's a possibility if you have any follow-up questions to that training. And I have a question here about whether we collect feedback. So at the end of every program, well, at the start and the end, we have a pre-program survey, a post-program survey. And we do review that feedback. And Kristen, maybe you could speak to a minute about our program year and how we go about updating our programs every year and how we use that feedback to advise and adjust our updates.
Oh gosh, feedback is so important to us. We have like as Lila said, we do have a survey, and I go through those in depth every year to analyze, how can people, what are the best techniques for learning and teaching this information, and what's engaging and compelling, and what was impactful for people, what inspired action. And so we take that very seriously. At the same time, I also have reached out and talked to some folks on the phone when if that's more helpful to them, and I always welcome, aside from the surveys, I also just really welcome your feedback and suggestions as well, just through email or over the phone, and I'll type my email in the box just in case.
I'll add that overwhelmingly the feedback for each of these programs has been really positive. We've had really positive feedback from people saying that it is a powerful process for them individually and for them as a small group. There are times that we, like Kristen said, where we get feedback where someone might say, I don't connect with this video, or I have a challenge with this part of the session. But that feedback has been constructive feedback for ways we can tweak little parts of the program, but we've received very little feedback from facilitators and participants that have said this is not a program that they would want to support or see expanded in their community. By and large, the vast majority of people have said it was positive for me and my small group, and we want to continue to see this program offered in our community.
And that's really thanks to our consultants who have been doing this work for years and years, and we're willing to share their best practices and wisdom on that.
Kristen, do you see any questions in your chat? I think
I do not.
Oh, I have one more. Okay. So this is a good one to end on, because I realize we're coming up on our time. The person asks about advice for the amount of time to plan, promote, invite, sign up before the program starts. And my answer to that question, like it seems like all of my answers, is it depends. So if you have a lot of free time that you can dedicate to reviewing the material, to promoting it in your community, to getting everything set and situated, you can do it pretty quickly. Within, even 3 weeks, you could register for the program, review that material, recruit participants, order the books. Typically, if you're ordering the books through us, it takes a little over a week, or about a week from placing the order to receiving those books in person. If you are someone who's working, whose time is very restricted, maybe you've got personal commitments, whatever those commitments may be, you might need a little bit longer, just so that you have time to adequately review the material, to do the hour-long training, to contact me with any questions, and to promote in your community. So I would say if you don't have a ton of time, maybe give yourself a month to 6 weeks lead time to really get going. But again, I've seen people, I have talked with people and worked with people who have called me, they learned about the program, they decided to register the next day, and they started the program a week and a half later. So it can happen really quickly. It just depends on your ability to get organized, to look at the material, and then to get the word out to your community.
And I did get one last question, if we could share a link to the promotional resources. Absolutely. Lila, will that be in the follow-up email?
Yeah, I'd be happy to include that in the follow-up email. I'll also include the video we shared at the beginning. So if you'd like to send that out to your community, I will include the link to the video as well. And I have one final question, and then this will be the end of it for us today. And if you have any more questions, feel free to respond to the email that I sent out. It's asked whether these programs are being done in other communities rather than church organizations. And yes, the answer is definitely yes. We see staff at schools. There's a lot of schools that are using this as a training resource for their staff. We are seeing it in nonprofits as a training resource for the staff of a nonprofit, or nonprofits are offering it for their volunteer community. We see groups of friends and not, I just said colleagues, but really groups of friends or like-minded faithful people who maybe are not committed to a church at the time. So people who are people of faith who want to engage in a small group community together, but again, aren't connected to an official church or parish. And then, of course, we do see people within churches who are using the program as a part of their faith formation or justice formation. So with that, I think that's it, Kristen.
Great. Well, I'm just so grateful to you all. I know if you're here, then you care deeply about this issue. And so we're just really grateful for the work that you're already doing and for your passion for this. It's important. And just know that, whether or not you decide to go forward with the programs, we're here and in solidarity with you. So keep in touch and let us know how we can be of support. Thank you, everybody.